Welcome to the Deep Dive, the place where we take a stack of fascinating source material and give you the fast track to being the most informed person in the room.
Today, we are undertaking a really extraordinary deep dive. We're shifting entirely outside our usual terrain, the American Southwest, and plunging instead into the humid, desperate chaos of Southeast Asia, April 1975.
That's right. We're unpacking this incredible convergence of personal tragedy, international collapse, and this really intense spiritual obligation, all centered around the narrative of finding Moon.
And our mission today is to understand what drives a seemingly ordinary man, Malcolm Mathias, or Moon, when his whole carefully constructed world just collides head-on with a geopolitical disaster.
And what makes this so fascinating is we aren't just tracing Moon's frantic race against the fall of Saigon. We're also at the same time looking at the author's notes, Tony Hillerman's notes.
Yeah, we're looking at how he actually built his iconic Navajo mysteries. And it reveals that Moon's desperate success, it might actually mirror Hillerman's own, let's call it a peculiar philosophy on solving plot problems.
It's a study in control versus chaos, guilt versus duty. Let's unpack this.
Yep.
So we begin far, far away from the war zone. Our protagonist, Malcolm Moon Mathias, he's the managing editor of the Press Register in Durance, Colorado.
Right, and he is a man who is defined by structure and routine. He oversees this, predictable churn of local news.
And you can see his entire worldview laid out in his system for handling the copy that comes off the teletype. He doesn't just categorize the news, he's compartmentalizing the entire world.
Yeah, using these labels that are, frankly, revealingly dry and cynical.
Absolutely. The categories tell the whole story. You've got the obvious ones, page one, sports, features, but then you get into the more emotional stuff.
Like FUNNY and then SOB stuff, which is, all the human interest, tragedies, the local tears.
But the last category is the one that really gets me, the one that's crucial for understanding Moon's whole psyche.
Pig iron.
Pig iron.
This is what Moon called the seriously dull, serious material that the League of Women Voters reads. So this is the weighty, necessary stuff he wishes he didn't have to deal with.
He wants to keep it at arm's length.
Exactly. I mean, that structure, that division must have been a comfort to him. If it's heavy, if it's boring, if it's global, it just goes into the pig iron file.
And it can't infect the rest of his life. His daily reality is simple stuff. A local one-fatality car truck collision, some vandalism at the elementary school, the city council roundup. That's his world.
Precisely. Pig iron is a psychological defense mechanism.
Mm.
And the irony is that in April of 1975, the very global chaos he was trying to file away.
The fall of Saigon.
Yeah, the rapidly deteriorating situation in Southeast Asia was appearing right at the top of that pig iron pile. But he could ignore it. It wasn't local.
Until it was.
Until the telephone system overseer, Shirley, hands him a slip of paper that just obliterates his entire routine.
The call changes everything. It's about his mother, Victoria Mathias.
Yeah.
And the geography is the first immediate red flag.
Right. Victoria lives in Miami Beach with her new, very wealthy husband, Tom Warwick.
But the call slip's area code isn't Florida.
No.
Yeah.
It's Los Angeles International Airport, LAX.
At first, Moon just dismisses it. I mean, his mother is famously meticulous. She wouldn't just collapse in an airport waiting room, right? Especially when she should be home. It defies her entire character.
But the airline security official, a Mr. Toland, he confirms it. The truth, right from her passport details. Victoria Mathias Warwick, mother of the managing editor in Durance, collapsed with severe chest pains.
Hospitalized at West Memorial, they're treating her for coronary issues, and the shock just forces Moon to confront this new reality.
And that reality gets so much worse when he asks about her flight. Toland tells him she was scheduled on Philippine Airlines, her destination, Honolulu, Manila, and Hong Kong.
And that single piece of information just shatters Moon's insulated world. It drags the worst possible global crisis out of that pig iron file and slams it right onto his personal front page.
He knows instantly where she was going.
Yeah. He realizes she was heading toward the exact region where his younger brother, Ricky, the bright, charismatic brother Moon, just idolized, had been killed.
Burned to ashes in a helicopter crash years earlier.
She wasn't flying toward a vacation. She was flying straight toward a tragedy.
And we have to pause here, because this is where Victoria's secret mission is revealed. It's driven by necessity and, I think, a really deep sense of shared family guilt.
And when Moon examines her purse, it's expensive, pearl gray leather, but it's slightly frayed. He finds the proof.
That little detail, the fraying of the purse, is just perfect. It tells you something. Victoria is usually pristine, Perfect.
So the fact that this specific purse is frayed suggests it's seen some hard travel, or maybe it just holds this immense sentimental value.
Exactly. And inside, the bombshell evidence, 2 airline tickets.
One for her, Victoria Mathias Mork, first-class round trip to Manila, but the second one.
The second one is a one-way ticket from Manila to Miami International in the name of baby girl Leela Vin Mathias.
Victoria was on her way to rescue her granddaughter, Leela.
Moon remembers a letter from Ricky mentioning Leela. He said she was fine, but her mother, Elif Vin, was getting more and more uneasy about the political climate.
The Pol Pot army gains in Cambodia. The family had this complex plan to get the child to the Sisters of Loreto convent school in Manila for safety.
And Victoria was trying to complete her dead son's final duty. She was doing it against the backdrop of this accelerating collapse. We really need to contextualize the state of the world she was flying into, April 1975.
News Moon had tried to ignore was suddenly deafening. Just around April 13th, President Thieu of South Vietnam was making these desperate declarations about reestablishing control in Xuan Loc, just 35 miles north of Saigon.
He was calling it a resounding defeat for the North Vietnamese.
But those claims were just. They were hollow. They were immediately countered by the cold reality coming from Radio Hanoi, and more importantly by the sheer volume of terrified refugees flooding into the capital.
They had stories of bitter, devastating losses. The military situation was, it was far past the point of being salvageable.
And this is where we see the cynicism about the U.S. involvement just peak. There's this Pentagon source, who, of course, declined to be identified.
Of course.
He estimated that the South Vietnamese Army, the ARVN, the Army of the Republic of Vietnam, had abandoned up to $700 million worth of U.S. military supplies.
$700 million in their disastrous retreat from the Central Highlands.
This wasn't just losing money. This was a massive transfer of strategic power. The source's quote is just... "It's so bitter, it encapsulates the whole failure of the withdrawal."
He said, we might as well have shipped it directly to Hanoi.
It's just a stunning admission. It demonstrates that the South Vietnamese military apparatus had essentially just dissolved, just handed over all this operational capability to the enemy.
And Victoria, even semi-conscious in a hospital bed, she understood. The window was slamming shut. She'd seen the TV news at LAX.
And she tells Moon, with an urgency that just completely overrides any concern for her own heart condition, things seem to be going to hell in that part of the world.
She doesn't ask him. She demands it. You just have to go and get our granddaughter.
And for Moon, this methodical, routine-driven editor, it's an immediate, catastrophic shift. He goes from managing headlines to creating one erase against an entire nation's failure. Moon, he handles the immediate logistics with his usual precision. He arranges for his mother's transfer to Cedars-Sinai through a contact named Blick.
Securing her in one of the country's best hospitals, he's a man who deals with crises by micromanaging the details he can actually control.
Right. And then he flies to Manila to confront the chaos of his brother's life and the total failure of his mother's rescue plan.
And in Manila, the logistical plan just falls apart immediately. He meets Roberto Castaneda, who is Ricky's lawyer.
Castaneda is described as small, frail, and confined to a battery-powered wheelchair, a figure already diminished by illness, trying to navigate something impossible.
And Castaneda confirms, yes, the baby, Leela, was supposed to arrive at the Sisters of Loreto convent school.
But the plan is already dead. Leela has not arrived. The reason? Complexities and confusions from the deteriorating situation in the Republic of Vietnam.
Which is code for something else.
Of course. It's code for cash. Castaneda had already withdrawn $2,500 American from Ricky's account for extraordinary expenses.
A euphemism for bribes to officials in Saigon who were, no doubt, just looking out for themselves at that point.
Absolutely. And the confusion over the baby's location is immediately compounded by something even stranger. A deeply spiritual obligation. Moon gets a visitor.
Mr. Lum Lee.
Mr. Lum Lee, an old friend and business associate of Ricky's. He sometimes contracted Ricky's company, RM Air, to pick up items in Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam.
But Lee isn't there for business.
Not at all. He's there for his family's spiritual foundation.
He's looking for a little urn, an urn containing his family's ancestral bones, which was part of Ricky's cargo when the helicopter went down.
And for Lee, this is not just sentiment. This is an absolute non-negotiable cultural imperative.
He explains this profound spiritual and cosmic connection. Losing the ancestral bones is a catastrophic spiritual failure. It results in bad fortune for the entire living family.
And he gives concrete recent examples. His niece's unexpected death, his grandson's shop burning to the ground. He believes the failure to properly house the bones means the family is actively courting disaster.
And this right here, this is the central thematic juxtaposition of the entire narrative, isn't it?
Absolutely. You have Moon, driven by this immediate secular guilt of his past. He has to save the living granddaughter.
And then you have Lum Lee, driven by this ancient, sacred obligation to his dead ancestors.
And Lee tells Moon that to retrieve the bones, Moon has to understand Feng Shui, this cosmic supernatural knowledge that dictates the proper placement of the ancestors' remains.
To ensure the family's health and luck.
And how complex is this concept? Lee mentions that the authoritative 19th century Taoist scholarship on the subject runs to 53 volumes.
53 volumes of dense Taoist scholarship right in the middle of a desperate, boots-on-the-ground military rescue mission.
The source material is telling us immediately that Moon's success cannot rely solely on the skills of an American editor-turned-mechanic. He's walked into a world where spiritual failure carries the same weight as military defeat.
So Moon's search continues. It expands into the dark side of RMR. He finds Thomas Brock, the marketing manager, who's basically hiding out in Ricky's apartment.
And Brock confirms that Ricky knew the war was over. He was planning to rebrand the company from RM Air to MR Air.
Moon Rick, or Mr. Air.
Yeah, to focus on maintenance and transport contracts outside of the collapsing ARVN connection.
But there's this shadow hanging over the business, and his name is George Rice, another RM Air pilot, now imprisoned on Palawan Island on suspicion of smuggling.
And Moon hears these conflicting stories. This is where he has to confront the moral ambiguity of the brother he put on a pedestal.
The local paper, The Express, they reported Rice was arrested for heroin smuggling.
But Rice's network, Brock, and later Osa, they suggest the charge was politically motivated or maybe related to the CIA.
So wait, if Rice and Osa are saying the CIA worked with traffickers and Ricky reportedly hated drugs, he saw how they ruined his crews. How did Ricky reconcile that? Running a business that constantly intersected with that massive political corruption.
That is a huge moral blind spot for the man Moon idolized. It forces Moon to recognize that RMR operated in a murky, high-risk world where ethics were highly fungible.
The CIA frequently partnered with drug traffickers in this region. The secret war supply lines were notoriously intertwined with the opium trade.
So Ricky had to navigate and sometimes use this corrupt network just to survive.
And Rice, the key to finding Leela, is locked up. Moon learns he's in a prison on Palawan Island, which a consulate official describes as holding regular criminals.
Yeah, he contrasts it sharply with Bilibad, the notorious main prison near Manila known for holding political prisoners.
So that distinction is important.
It is. Rice is viewed by the authorities as a common crook, not a political operative, even if his friends think the CIA was involved.
And the prison itself is described as basically a big rice plantation surrounded by jungle.
Which means it's less a fortified structure and more an open-air detention camp. And that immediately suggests escape is possible.
But only if Moon is willing to engage in criminal activity himself. So while Moon is figuring out the mechanics of a prison break, he meets Osa van Winjgaarden, the third pillar of this desperate team. She's Dutch, tall, slim, but she's from Timor.
A woman with practical knowledge that Moon desperately lacks.
Osa is crucial because she speaks Cambodian French and various Montagnard mountain dialects. That makes her invaluable for moving through the deep jungle regions Moon is heading toward.
And her legitimate business is exporting crafts, bamboo blowguns, fetish figures, shark bones. So again, she's outside the typical Western military-industrial complex. She's closer to local cultures.
But her mission is driven by this profound, agonizing grief, retrieving her brother, Damon, a former French teacher who runs a clinic in the remote Montagnard settlements of Cambodia.
And this is where the stakes escalate beyond just bureaucratic chaos into pure, terrifying horror. Osa confirms that Damon is determined to die with his people.
And the Khmer Rouge atrocities are not theoretical. They are meticulously brutal.
Tell us more about the horror she describes, because this really grounds their motivation in a reality that Moon, the Colorado editor, can barely even fathom.
The Khmer Rouge weren't just killing soldiers. They were engaged in a calculated cultural annihilation. Osa describes how they target the symbols of civilization.
The well-dressed, the well-educated.
Or anyone with soft, uncalloused hands.
And to conserve precious ammunition, they execute them by tying them to a tree and beating them to death with sticks. Damon knows this is his certain fate.
But he views it as a necessary suicide.
So Moon now has his twin goals. rescue Leela, the family legacy, and aid Osa in rescuing her brother from a suicidal date with atrocity.
The three of them, Moon, Osa, and Lum Lee, head to Palawan.
They visit Rice in this non-fortified prison, and Rice confirms the Leela transfer failed entirely because of the corruption and politics of the war's end.
The CIA, he says, refused to pay favors to the dead Ricky.
Right, so his contact, Loco Dem, was forced to keep the child in Saigon.
And the genius of the Palawan prison is immediately utilized. Rice, leveraging the lack of walls, just escapes that night.
Simple as that.
And Moon, the former military man turned engineer, he secures their transportation, the glory of the sea freighter.
But there's a problem. The freighter's ancient Euclid diesel engine is dead. And this is where Moon's mundane methodical skills, the ones he used fixing farm equipment, become utterly vital.
He repairs the engine. It's a great moment where his character, the mechanic, the hands-on fixer, temporarily overcomes all the political chaos.
So now the group Moon, Osa, Lum Lee, and the newly freed George Rice are steaming toward the Mekong Delta. But before we get deeper into the war zone, we really need to understand the psychological engine that is driving Moon. Why is he willing to risk everything?
And this takes us back to the core of his identity. It's revealed during a quiet confessional visit to a Father Julian in Manila. This is Moon's great defining burden.
He confesses his great sin.
Killing a man while driving drunk in an army vehicle. The charge was homicide committed during a felony, carrying a 20-year sentence. He wasn't just afraid of the consequences, he was terrified of being locked away in prison.
And the second sin, the one that's even more consequential, was the action he forced his mother to take to save him.
He told Victoria about his terror, and Victoria, to save her son from 2 decades in a military prison, she promptly married Dr. Morick.
A wealthy, influential man with the political connections necessary to intervene.
That is an extraordinary sacrifice, marrying a man you despise to commute a prison sentence. How much of Moon's desperation in Southeast Asia is truly about Leela, and how much is about trying to, retroactively justify that sacrifice to himself?
Oh, it's almost entirely self-redemption. Moon holds this deep self-contempt. He views Dr. Morick as a stuffy, boring, self-important old bachelor whom Victoria never would have chosen otherwise.
He knows she did it solely to save her pitiful boy.
He sees himself as a total loser. Therefore, this mission to save Leela and retrieve Lum Lee's ancestral bones, it becomes this immediate, desperate need to avoid living with too much failure.
He has to prove he was worthy of his mother's sacrifice. He has to become the good guy hanging around to save the poor maiden, even if that self-image is based on a lie and built on a foundation of guilt. So, driven by this overwhelming need to succeed, the group enters the war zone. Their journey up the Mekong Delta is it's visually terrifying.
The water is brown and muddy, and the landscape is dominated by the devastating sight of dead jungle, killed by Agent Orange.
There was that grim slogan the C-130 crews had, "Only we can prevent a forest. The chemical devastation is just total."
And the human toll is immediate. They see refugee sampans, these small, crowded boats, loaded not just with possessions, but with whispers, sorrow, people sobbing. They are traveling backward through a catastrophic humanitarian crisis.
And the internal politics of the RM Air crew, they surface first. They arrive at the RM Air Base in Long Phu, and they find several operational aircraft.
4 Hueys and a massive Chinook transport helicopter.
But George Rice, the man Moon, risked his neck and committed grand theft to free. He immediately betrays the group.
He steals a Huey helicopter, the iconic transport of the Vietnam War, to fly away captured ARVN officers. He trades his own freedom for a massive sum of money.
Rice justifies it with this cynical pragmatism, right? Arguing he'd rather sell the copters to Malaysia or Thailand than leave them for the communists.
And Moon, Osa, and Lum Lee, they have to hide in a warehouse listening to the inevitable. They hear artillery fire, probably Canto falling, and then the radio reports confirming the final, desperate evacuation of the U.S. Embassy in Saigon.
The fat lady sang. The official end. They are stranded. The immediate organized military structure that Moon relies on is just gone.
So their only option is to use the final resource, a piece of American military hardware that Moon knows intimately.
An M113 armored personnel carrier.
Yeah.
An APC. The exact model he trained on at Fort Riley.
They're aided by a wounded VNN, a Vietnam Navy Sea Lord sailor named Nguyen Nung, who has this fierce kill communists tattoo, just embodying the absolute desperation of the local forces. The APC becomes their last hope.
And the drive through the Delta is visceral. They use rice sacks inside the APC, which Moon identifies as improvised mine protection, a technique learned the hard way by troops who found the M113's aluminum armor was too thin against landmines.
They have to navigate a complete societal breakdown. They're dodging Viet Cong convoys and, even more dangerously, these chaotic bands of ARVN deserters who are just creating bloody chaos, stealing, murdering with no restraint.
And they survive a close-range ambush. The sheer force of the explosion sends the APC tilting nearly 45 degrees into a ditch.
Moon is exhausted, dizzy, running on pure adrenaline and guilt. Eventually, he has to surrender the driver's seat. He's physically broken, and Osa takes over, proving her resilience and her capability.
They push across the border into Cambodia, and this is where the interwoven missions meet their tragic, predictable end. First, Damon's fate.
At his Montagnard village, they find the terrible confirmation. Osa's suicidal brother was found dead, shot by the Khmer Rouge. Her desperate mission ends in grief.
A failure Moon tried so desperately to prevent.
Then, the ancestral bones. They find Leaphorn's village, Vinh Ba. It's deserted and burned. Lum Lee, crestfallen but meticulous, examines the spot where the ancestral urn was hidden.
The bones are simply lost. Another unfulfilled Mathias contract.
Moon feels the full weight of failure. He failed to save Damon. He failed to secure the ancestral bones. He enabled Rice's betrayal. His whole guilt-driven mission seems to be collapsing into itself.
But this failure is what leads to the profound emotional and thematic breakthrough. They find Leela alive.
And the reason for her survival links directly back to Lum Lee's spiritual necessity.
The Vinh family, Leaphorn's relatives, had observed Lum Lee's reverent spiritual ritual, the 53 volumes of Taoist scholarship and practical action, and concluded he was a religious man.
And therefore non-hostile. They trusted the man who cared for the dead more than they trusted the foreigner rushing to save the living.
It's tragic, though. Lila's grandmother, Leaphorn's mother, had been shot and died just the previous night.
The transaction is swift, conducted in the ruins of the village. Moon is handed the infant, Leela, along with a bundle of supplies. He leaves the rice sacks, their life-saving mine protection, as payment.
And the Vinh family just disappears into the woods, leaving Moon, finally, with the physical evidence of his success. A success achieved not through military strategy, not through the chaos of war, but through the accidental leveraging of an ancient spiritual observance entirely outside of his Durant's Colorado worldview. And now we make the thematic bridge. We leave the steaming, humid chaos of Southeast Asia, and we transition to the high, dry landscape of the Navajo Nation. We move from Moon's accidental success to the highly intentional process behind Tony Hillerman's creative solutions.
We have to frame Moon's success as a plot problem solved by coincidence, or maybe more accurately, by unexpected observation.
Yeah.
Moon succeeded not through his training, but by accidentally fulfilling Lum Lee's spiritual contract, which gained him the trust of the local people.
And this mirrors Hillerman's own methodology.
Hillerman's notes confirm that he rarely relied on forced narrative devices. He relied heavily on observation and real-world experience to solve crucial plot problems. It wasn't about meticulous plotting, it was about integrating reality.
Let's look at the famous example from Skinwalkers. Hillerman struggled with this core technical problem. How do you logically, naturally awaken Officer Jim Chee, who's sleeping in his flimsy trailer, exactly moments before an assassin's shotgun blast tears through the wall?
Right. He refused the easy out the psychic coincidence.
His solution was purely observational. It was sparked by remembering the distinct mechanical sound a friend's pet made. He recalled the clack-clack of a friend's cat door.
So he immediately rode in a spooky stray cat that Chee had adopted and for whom he had installed a cat door. The cat, spooked by the approaching assassin, darts inside and wakes Chee. And this served two critical functions at the same time.
It solved the technical plot problem elegantly, providing a logical mechanism for Chee's survival. But even more importantly, it developed Chee's character. It allowed Hillerman to naturally establish the Navajo concept of equal citizenship relationships with animals.
It deepens the cultural immersion.
Another beautiful example comes from Talking God. Hillerman initially intended to write a simple gang murder story, but while attending Sunday Mass, he noticed one specific person, an elderly Hispano usher with an aristocratic face, dressed in an expensive but well-worn suit.
And that single detail, the aristocratic face, the expensive yet worn suit, it forced a shift in the entire narrative's trajectory. The murder victim could no longer be a generic gang member.
He became the high-profile victim of a Central American political assassination, turning the mystery into something far grander and more complex.
And what's fascinating here is that the author, like Moon, succeeds when he stops trying to force a pre-planned outcome and instead opens himself up to observation.
Whether that's the reality of a cat door in New Mexico or the reality of a 53-volume Taoist spiritual code in Southeast Asia.
Hillerman's commitment extended deeply into the cultural context. He didn't just use the Navajo Nation as a backdrop. He embedded the Navajo Genesis story, Zuni theology, and concepts like the hero twins, Monster Slayer and Born for Water, right into the fabric of his mysteries.
And to really appreciate the backdrop of the Leaphorn and Chee novels, we need to understand the structural, non-geopolitical chaos that Hillerman explored, the reality of the Navajo Nation profile, or Dinbaikia, the land of the people.
This is the largest federally recognized tribe, with over 255,000 members. It's geographically vast, covering over 27,000 square miles across Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah.
It's physically larger than 10 of the 50 U.S. states.
And when you look at the Navajo Nation, you realize that chaos isn't just geopolitical, it's structural and infrastructural. Despite its size, the region faces these massive socioeconomic challenges, which dictates the reality of survival for its residents.
According to figures from that era, a staggering 56% of the Navajo people lived below the poverty level. And the isolation is just intensified by the condition of the infrastructure.
We're talking about massive deficits. 77% of the 6,184 miles of roads on the nation are dirt or gravel. In terms of housing, 51% of homes lack complete plumbing, and nearly half, 48%, do not have complete kitchen facilities.
This context is so vital. Much like Moon being stranded without roads or functioning communication in the Delta, the isolation and lack of modern infrastructure on the reservation forces characters like Jim Chee to rely on deep cultural knowledge, self-sufficiency, and tribal structures, rather than external federal or state systems for solutions.
And that self-governance is highly sophisticated. The Navajo Nation government operates with three distinct branches: executive, legislative, it's a large 88-member council, and judicial, with their own Supreme Court, all headquartered in Window Rock, Arizona.
Their right to self-govern, which was affirmed by the Treaty of 1868, gives them sovereign authority. That means issues of law, order, and justice often pit tribal concerns against the concerns of the surrounding U.S. jurisdiction. And that heightens the intellectual stakes of every single mystery Chee and Leaphorn investigate. So we return to Manila. The immediate chaos is behind them: Moon, Osa, Lum Lee, and the infant Leela. The paperwork for Leela is expedited by the embassy, less hassle than expected, which is maybe a small mercy granted by the final stages of the U.S. withdrawal.
And when Moon finally manages to contact his mother, Victoria, he recounts the entire journey. The Palawan prison break, the Euclid engine repair, the APC drive, the trip deep into Cambodia to the burned village of Vinba. He explains why the rescue took days instead of hours.
And Victoria's reaction is so muted, it suggests this remarkable psychological distance or maybe just overwhelming exhaustion. She simply says, well, you already told me the baby didn't get to Manila, so she had known it would take me a little longer.
Moon is stunned. His entire identity was just remade in this crucible of fire and guilt, and his mother minimizes it to a slight logistical delay. It just emphasizes how little he understands the people around him, especially the mother who sacrificed her life to save his.
Moon still has to face the domestic fallout, returning to Durance and potentially being fired by his publisher, Shake Shaft. But he achieves this moment of self-awareness with Osa.
He realizes he doesn't understand anyone anymore. Osa, on the other hand, she understands the weight of expectation. When he asks why she's sad, she confirms it's because she is losing Moon.
M-O-O-N. Not the man Malcolm Mathias, the editor, but the mythological, heroic figure Ricky had described. The one who could fix anything. The fearless man who could knock over linebackers.
The good guy Moon had been trying so desperately to retroactively embody. The real Moon, the flawed man compensating for guilt, is the one who promises to return in 8 or 10 days. He's permanently changed, yet still clinging to the routines of his small-town life.
So we bring the two halves of this deep dive together. What is the final compelling takeaway from this convergence of Hillerman's creative process and Moon's life-or-death mission?
I think the central theme is the burden of inherited responsibility and the unexpected way failure leads to success. You have Moon Mathias, crushed by the burden of inherited failure, his brother's contracts, his mother's sacrifice.
And he succeeds only by accidentally capitalizing on Lum Lee's lost ancestral bones. The loss of the bones created the trust that was necessary to find Leela.
And then you have Tony Hillerman's parallel professional failure. He started the Jim Chee character, the beloved Navajo Tribal Police officer, largely because he had sold the TV rights to Leaphorn, and he needed a new character he could actually own, a legacy he could control.
This raises a powerful question about legacy and unintended consequences. Moon's entire mission was a response to his great sin, the failure that cost his mother her marriage. Hillerman's creation of Chee was a response to his professional failure of losing control over his first great creation, Leaphorn.
What does it mean to be truly haunted by a legacy? Whether that legacy is family failure, an ancestral spirit requiring proper placement, or even the intellectual property of a beloved fictional character.
The missions, both physical and creative, were saved by the unexpected observation of failure. Moon found Leela because the ancestral bones were lost. Hillerman found Jim Chee because the rights to Leaphorn were gone.
That leaves us with a provocative thought for you to explore. If your most significant successes often derive not from flawless planning, but from adapting to or leveraging the unexpected consequences of failure, how often do you truly recognize the necessary cost of what you inherit and the profound power of what you are ultimately forced to create?